Yes, folks, hello, welcome once again to Monetary Games and Collectibles. It's time for another action figure review here on the channel. And as you can see on the screen in front of you, today's installment is going to be taking a closer look at the brand new G.I. Joe Classified Series Cobra-La Royal Guard figure. So stick around, I'm going to give you all the ins and outs, ups and downs that you need to know. So if you've been thinking about picking up a Royal Guard of your own, you'll have some good, thorough information to make a purchase decision with. Hit things off by jumping back in time and taking a look at the packaging the day it arrived on my doorstep. Then we'll move on to the figure itself, talk about the aesthetic and the visual experience, take a look at the articulation and how poseable he is, move on to the accessories and the added value, pop him next to a couple of other G.I. Joe Classified Series figures to see how he compares, and then finish off with a nice 360 view. And with all that said and done, as I mentioned before, you should have loads of proper, thorough information to know whether this is the figure for you to crack your wallet or purse open with. So let's get into it, and let's jump back in time to visit past Chris, taking a look at the packaging when it arrived at my doorstep. Here we go. Okay then, folks, well, here is the Cobra-La Royal Guard in packaging, and as you can see, we've got the window box at the front there showing off the figure and all the goodies. G.I. Joe Classified Series logo across the bottom, Cobra symbol for Cobra character, and then the Cobra-La, like techno-organic-y, secret Himalayas base motify stuff around the outside. Then on the back, we've got the digital render of the figure in action, a few breakaway windows showing off some key features, the head swaps mostly by the looks of it here. It's number 191 in the line, got all the legal bollocks and malarkey across the bottom, and then of course, we've got the file card information. Let's learn more about Cobra-La Guards together, shall we? So here we've got a lightning bolt. This indicates that the Cobra-La Royal Guards are all, in fact, 201 frightened of thunder and lightning, terrified. They're like dogs on bonfire night when there's a storm going on. It's a very unusual situation, perhaps something to do with the kind of insectoid DNA that sits within them. Speaking of insect DNA, that is a moth lamp there. Yep, that's right. Another thing they're absolutely terrified of. This file card is communicating to us one of their main weaknesses. This one here is interesting. This is a tree on its side. This is to indicate the Cobra-La Royal Guards' love of recreational tree climbing. They get the straps out, they get the boots with the spiky bits on them, and they like to, make their way up to the top of trees and then take a quick photo on the phone, get it on Insta, check out this view, all that kind of good stuff. Keep it good for physical health, good for mental health, and that's what a Cobra-La Royal Guard is all about, communing with nature. And then finally a fist bump, because, they're brotherly and collegiate, and so they fist bump each other all the time. On the side here, got the painted artwork of the Cobra-La Royal Guard. This one actually looks pretty decent. I don't think that's AI generated. It's got a sort of better shading vibe. I don't know, could be. Is it slightly disproportionate? Anyway, that one's not too bad. That's one of the better ones we've seen lately. And then on the other side, the number, the repeat of the file card, the repeat of the artwork, and the QR code to nowhere. And there we go then, folks. There's the Cobra-La Royal Guard in packaging, but I'm not an in-packaging guy. I'm going to crack this bad boy open, get good and hands-on, get some man-child playtime in, take some photos, make some mini little displays, pose him up with some other figures in my classified collection, see how he does, make some notes, and come back and share some review thoughts. So stick around. Future Chris will come back and give you those review thoughts in 3, 2, 1. All right then, folks, and let's begin by talking about the aesthetic qualities, the visual experience with the Cobra-La Royal Guard here. This is how the figure came out the box, so this was the head sculpt that they chose to put in the window. All crazy eyes here. We'll obviously revisit the visual experience when we come to looking at the accessories and added value and start messing around with the head swaps and such like, because clearly a number of the accessories alter the aesthetic, alter the visual experience. But this is the core figure as it stands raw out the box. And as you can see, in terms of visual identity, it's clearly the Cobra-La Royal Guard, as you would know and love from G.I. Joe the movie, with that 3D plastic 6-inch classifiedization over the top. So it's a nice mashup between the OG vintage look that you would draw down in your mind's eye from the cartoon, from the movie, with a modern day contemporary twist. Getting in a bit closer, inspecting the finer details, we can see that there's lots of stuff in here, lots of sculpting and paint applications and such like to give it depth, to give it character, to give it personality. The head sculpt here is in the blue, skin tone, the visage that we saw in the movie and in some of the later comic books and such like. This one here, as I say, I've described it as crazy eyes, but it's indicative of the sculpting quality on the two helmetless head sculpts we do get in the pack. And it's up to the usual standard, great sculpting detail, interesting paint applications, I'll say. But broadly speaking, it's okay, but the facial features are all there. The bald head and the kind of, the way the skin is across the bald head, the more pointy elfin style ears there and such like. So really, really awesome. The teeth, the big wacky grin, and then the crazy eyes, which I think are intentionally sort of painted a little bit, like this one's a wee bit closed and squinty, and this one's a bit wider, indicating some sort of madness. I don't think I've got a defective one, but it does look a little bit cross-eyed to me. And then moving down into the figure, you can see that they've really leaned into and explored that kind of techno, organic-y, carapace type thing in the Cobra-La style armor. So he's got these shoulder pads with those kind of spikes, which is nice and consistent and cohesive with the stuff you're seeing on Pythona and Nemesis Immortal from the line, along with these kind of bone-coloured elements throughout. There's a bit across the arm here. You can see it across the shoulder pads, across the chest plate, and then further down you can see it on the thighs here, on the legs, and across the back of his gauntlets there, or his wrist guards. They're sculpted in and painted across the rear as well. And you can see within all this, there's that lovely textured detail. Like, look at the shoulders here with these like little kind of spiky bits in them, and the sort of bony sculpt on these bone-coloured sections here. You can really see it on the thigh piece, actually. And all, running your finger over it, you can feel the texture in there. You can see it on his underpants, the little spiky bits as well. Just really, just hugely leaning into that kind of crustacean-y, carapace type thing. To really take that visual language, that cohesive theme home. I was a little bit concerned when I first saw the digital renders and some of the promo photos that these bone-coloured bits might look a bit too plasticky. And yeah, they do look plasticky, but they're nowhere near as egregious or as plasticky looking as I was concerned. They've not gone to the full extent of giving them a wash. At least I don't think they have. If they have, I can't tell. But the colour choice in the plastic itself means that it's sort of blending nicely and it's not sitting too stark and toyetic-y. Where he is looking a bit plasticky and toyetic-y is in the kind of the bodysuit underneath. And while it's got some nice sculpted details, like you can see that sort of ribbon shape on the arms there and on the front of the chest and down the thighs here, you can see on the inside of the legs, which is a nice touch and giving it some depth. The grey does look a little plastic toy, but that's fine. I mean, it's just trimming. You don't really hone in on it unless you're writing detailed notes to make a YouTube review out of. You see more of the detail there up the back as well. Some of that more sculpted detail in here. Love this little trimming bit on the side of this thigh pad. Really, really nice. And then look at the sculpt on the boots. Got the spiky bits in there. That kind of crustacean kind of vibe to them. Sculpted details in on the feet. This is a separate piece that's over the top of the core leg. You can see the little flashes of the grey bodysuit underneath coming through, which is nice, And then we have the soft goods cape here, which has got a pretty decent drape down the figure, as you can see. It's pegged in. There's a couple of pegs underneath this shoulder point here that's holding it in with some holes at the top there, with the gap at the back here for some of the bits we're going to look at later, the wings, to be specific. So it's nice. It's a good black. It's a bit shiny, but that's okay. Would we have liked it to be wired? Which I know is an articulation point, but I bring it up nonetheless. Yes, of course we would, but Serpentor's isn't wired, Pythona's isn't wired, so I think at this point now, you need it to be non-wired to ensure its consistency with the rest of the line. All I'll say is that, Jada managed it, Hasbro. M. Bison's got a wired cape, just saying. But you can see visually from the front, it hangs nicely. Got a good drape coming down the body, and you can sort of tuck it in behind his arms and play around with it a bit. The only thing is when you're doing an action shot, like when you got him stabbing someone with the pointy end of his spear, you can't get that sort of dynamic thing going on where it's up in the air. And then a couple of other bits, sculpted in belt, got this little metallic piece here, this little, I don't know, like a release valve or something on his breastplate there, which, probably serves some form of purpose. Which is fine. The belt is definitely a bit plasticky and a bit toyetic, and they've not painted the belt buckle. Boo. It feels a bit chunky. He's a bit of a bulky boy. I kind of, again, in my mind's eye, I've not gone back and rewatched it in preparation for this video, but in my mind's eye from the movie, they were a bit more lithe, they were a bit more slim, and a different type of athleticism. This looks a bit bodybuildery, as they seemed a bit different to me. That's not an issue. That's just a matter of interpretation, I suppose, but just observation. Oh yeah, there you go. There's the kind of visual rundown. I think overall, we can all agree he's got a very striking shelf presence. The aesthetic experience, the visual experience, pretty damn good. And aside from a few complaints about it looking a little plasticky here and there, which is, consistent with the line, to be fair, and what they're doing at this price range over at Hasbro, it's all good. Super fun figure, great fun to look at. Really stands out on the shelf. He's got so much character and personality. I'm really enjoying it. I reckon that's a thumbs up, folks. Thumbs up on the aesthetic. Let's now go on to take a look at his articulation and posability, shall we? And as always, folks, just a quick note for those who are relatively familiar with G.I. Joe Classified Series articulation already, and less interested to know about this figure precisely, then I'll put timestamps in below. Please avail yourselves of the chapters and jump forward to the accessories and added value section, which is going to be a big section on this video. However, if this is the first G.I. Joe Classified Series review you've ever watched, or you're interested to know if there's any particular quirks with this figure, then stick around and I'll talk you through it. And starting with the head, we've got the ball in the skull and the ball at the base of the neck. What we have got, though, is these high shoulder pads and this high collar on his bodysuit underneath, which does get in the way a little bit. So you're down sort of to there, your back is up to there. You can go all the way around if you didn't have the tall collar and shoulder pads in the way, and then you can sort of tilt it around and stuff as much as you can. Again, with this collar getting in your way, so the articulation is there. It's just a little bit restricted by the sculpt, and that will be consistent with the other head sculpts. When we take a look at the head swaps in a little bit. Then moving down into the shoulder, it's the butterfly joint, the peg, and the hinge. So you can shuffle forward and back, and go all the way around, and you can tee him out to there. Got the swivel at the top of the bicep and tricep, pinless double elbow that'll get you up to there, and then pegged in hands, which you can, swivel somewhat in the wrist point, but they're obscured by the wrist guards here. And then we've got forward and back hinge on the right hand and up and down hinge on the left. Barbell joint in the torso and then ball joint in the waist, giving you lots of swivel and movement there. His crunching's not fantastic. It's it's a big chunky chest piece that kind of gets in the way, but it's not too bad. But he can't go forward very far. And then coming down into the groin and the hips, we've got the drop down ball joints at the top of the legs in the hip area there, giving decent forward to there, and your Russian ballet splits out to there. Got the thigh swivel in here as well, and the armor piece, the thigh piece across the top, is loose at the back there, so it doesn't get in the way of the swivel there, look like that. Although you are somewhat limited with the holster, and the way you can see there, it's knocking at the top of the hip. You've got a pinless double knee that'll get you up to there. Got a swivel at the top of the boot, bit tight, bit limited. I put some heat on it. I think it's being restricted by the sculpt shape around the calf area here. And then you got the hinge and rockers in the ankles. And there, the forward hinge is obstructed by the way the this shin piece comes at the front there, so you can't. Sometimes your really far forward motion that you might want for a pose isn't available to you. So he moves all right. I mean, the articulation points are standard and consistent with the rest of the G.I. Joe Classified Series line. Your main problem, as I pointed out as we've been going along, is that the design choices, the aesthetic choices in terms of the way his armor is and such like, gets in the way a little bit sometimes of the movement that you might want to try and do. And I must admit, there was a few times I was trying to pose him up. I had a picture of what I wanted to do with him in my mind. But then when I was trying to get him into that position, couldn't quite do it because I needed just a little bit more lean with the foot forward, or I couldn't quite swivel enough at the boot or the thigh because of the carapace armor pieces on his legs, or his crunch wasn't coming forward, or I couldn't bend. It just ever so slightly couldn't get him quite where I wanted him to be for the type of pose I was going for. I got close, but not quite there. That's something to bear in mind. He feels a little bit clunky to pose around with. If you're trying to bring something in your mind's eye to life. However, I'll always small print and caveat that by saying that I'm not the most talented in that area in any case. So I am going to give it a thumbs up, but I'm sort of going to, somewhere between the halfway line and the top. Maybe giving him a 9 o'clocker, I reckon, there. No, that's not 9 o'clock. Where's that? 9 o'clock's there. Giving him a sort of half tenner. A half tenner there. Because, he's all right. He's fine, but he's not quite as good. But I wouldn't want them to sacrifice the awesome look. So, you take the rough with the smooth. All right, then. Well, there's the articulation and posability, folks. Let's now move on and take a closer look at all the extra goodies that come along with this guy. And I'm going to kick things off with the accessories and added value with the head sculpts. And this is one of 3 additional head sculpts, making 4 in total with the one that was on him out the box. We've got 2 helmeted and 2 helmetless, and this one on screen now is obviously helmetless. We can see that it's the same, blue Cobra-La skin tone as the first crazy-eyed head was, but this one's much more stoic, much more serious. Really interesting sculpt on this one. Not only does it have the great facial features that we've come to know and expect from G.I. Joe Classified, but just, again, little personality pieces like the scar there going across his face, and he looks a little bit mangled up, and this dude's seen some combat, you know what I mean? So that's really lovely, especially with that kind of stern, kind of extraterrestrial, alien-looking eyes in there and stuff. So really, really nice head sculpt, and I'd much prefer that one to the Crazy Eyes, Crazy Grin. Then we have the classified interpretation of the classic look helmet, which is obviously drawing very heavy inspiration from the original design, but with their own little twist. So we've got the kind of helmet shape there with the aerial and the breather mask for the communicator and breather at the front in the grey plastic. Then we've got the red sections with the same sort of carapace armor style, and then the bony embellishments on there in the same kind of bone colour as we're getting across the other spaces. But one lovely touch on this helmet, of course, is this excellent kind of insectoid kind of eyepieces there with the lovely shiny blue paint job on them. They're not only sculpted nicely, but the paint application really makes it stand out. Probably my favourite look, the classic look there, because I can't get enough of those insectoid eyes. The last head swap is another helmeted head. In fact, it's identical to the other helmet that I was just showing you, aside from this kind of horned beetle kind of thing sticking out the front there with that kind of massive kind of horned beetle look and the horns at the side there. This does have some lovely kind of weathering on it, which really gives it some depth and brings it to life. Unfortunately, not consistent throughout the body. If you look at the thigh pieces there and then look at that, this kind of makes the thigh pieces stand out as not as being a bit diminished there. But yeah, there's a wonderful kind of interpretation of the helmet with this kind of unique, like I say, a horned beetle kind of vibe to it for me, or a sort of dinosaur vibe, I suppose. Lenny's mad on dinosaurs. So yeah, really great. I must admit, I'm not so keen on this one in terms of my personal preference to display the figure, but I can certainly appreciate the quality of that sculpt and what they were trying to do with it for sure. Then we've got these larger, bulkier shoulder pieces here on the armor. I've pegged one on and not the other, just so that I can show you the kind of pegging system. But yeah, just more of the same, really. It's just bigger and chunkier and more in your face, more kind of bony pieces across the front here. It looks a little bit more kind of sculpted in that sort of spiky crustacean kind of style there across the shoulder pads sculpt. And you see loads of kind of spiky stuff on it coming up across the back here, and these kind of swooshy, kind of sharp edges to the armor pieces, which is really, really nice. And then you can see the way you do this is you've got a shoulder peg here, a peg hole on the shoulder, then a hole in the cloak, just like you used to do with your old Lego figs. Then you got the actual peg in the shoulder piece, and you just sort of peg it in over the top. Although I'm gonna have to bring it closer to me, guys. There you go. And then you just make sure you drape the cape sort of nicely underneath the shoulder pieces there. Then we have the wing pieces here, really leaning into that sort of insectoid kind of themed, insectoid kind of aesthetic vibe. With the wing there in this lovely translucent blue with all the kind of veins and stuff throughout on the wing pieces, and then the costal and the other veins in the matching bony colour. Obviously, there's one for the left and the right, and you can see here we've got these pegs, which allow you to peg them into these holes on his back, like so. And then you can see from the other side just that big flash of that lovely shiny translucent blue, which kind of matches up with the eyepieces on the helmet. And these can articulate in on the peg point, just on a swivel, like so. Then we've got these, again, larger, bulkier wrist guard pieces with these big, again, sort of horn beetle style claws and sticky outy bits there, to do some damage and to slice and dice some folks up. Dead simple. Pop the hands, swap out the wrist guards they're on there, slide these ones on. It is a bit tricky putting the hands back in with the way that these claw bits come over the front there. because you can't quite get the... Anyway, I'm a cackhand, but I found it a bit tricky. And into the weapon loadout, we've got this big kind of sword axe type thing. It's not responding well to the lighting, folks, but I think you can see the sort of bony colour and the sculpted detail within that, like the little chippy bits and the bladed sides and the pointy bits on there. Got the sculpted handle that they can hold it by too, in a grey colour that's consistent with the bodysuit on the uniform, and then this little extra kind of stabby, slicey bit at the bottom. This appeared in the movie. Then we have the spear with the kind of, again, sort of stabby fork, or the Cobra-La interpretation of a fork there. Again, with that kind of bony, sculpted detail in there and the sharp, pointy edges, as well as a consistent stabby piece at the bottom, and the grip handles, again, in the same design as the sword axe thing, and in the same grey as the rest of the bodysuit. What I will say is these grippy bits are spread quite far out. I was finding myself sort of posing him, holding it by the main body. And then finally, we've got this like little laser pistol thing. Again, it's in the same grey colour, single piece of sculpted plastic. Got a kind of unique Cobra-La design. I don't think we've seen this before in the line, which is giving off this more kind of science fiction-y, made by crazy scientists in a Himalayan mountain lab, as opposed to, our kind of gunpowder weaponry, gunpowder firearms. So that's fine. It's got a holster on the hip for storage. He doesn't grip it very well. That little pistol finger area is a bit tight. It's hard to get in his grip. But I must admit, I'm leaning more into these kind of melee weapons than I am into the pistol in the way I've been posing him and taking pictures. So, yeah, I've got to give the accessory selection a thumbs up. Whether it's added value or not, I suppose I'll let you make your own minds up. I mean, I'm certainly appreciative of all the extra options, like my enjoyment of Tripwire and Budo in the past. I love it when we get kind of, lots of kitbashy customizable bits, and obviously with a figure like this, if you're army building it, and the ability to bring some variety and personality to a unit that you might be putting together is great. Head swaps and stuff, and different sort of weaponry selections and shoulder pad selections and things, wings or no wings, entirely up to you. That all works for me, but obviously it comes at a higher price tag, so the question of value we get more, you get more thrown in, but they've charged us for it, However, it does give you lots of great man-child playtime, does open up a world of possibility for the types of displays and photos and stuff that you might want to do, so I can't do anything but give it a thumbs up. So it works. The only thing I might have liked is some closed fist hands. That was about the only thing I was sort of found myself lamenting as I was doing some stuff with the figure the other night. So there we go. But let me know in the comments your thoughts about whether it's added value or not. Okay, so there we go. There's the Cobra-La Royal Guard's accessory selection, added value. Let's now take a quick peek at him next to a couple of other classified figures. And to get us started, here is the Cobra-La Royal Guard next to Pythona. Here's the Royal Guard with Nemesis Immortal. Here's the Royal Guard next to Serpentor. Here he is next to Big Lob. And then finally next to another G.I. Joe movie favourite, Mercer. Okay then folks, well here's the Royal Guard going around on the turntables. You can get a nice final 360 view look of the figure, and while you're eyeballing that, I'll offer up my concluding thoughts. If you're a regular around these parts, you know that you'll know one, if not all three of these things. The first is, I like it when my G.I. Joe is a bit science fiction, a bit fantastical, and a bit balmy, and this is definitely that. You'll know that I have a fond nostalgic warmth for G.I. Joe the movie, and this is, of course, a G.I. Joe the movie Cobra-La-centric character. And third and finally, you'll know I love it when they take the original look and feel and the visual identity of the character, but do something a little bit fresher and more classified eyes with it, which this does too. So it's a 3 for 3 for me. It's hitting the core triumvirate of things that I want from my G.I. Joe Classified series. So I've got to give it a thumbs up. I've got to recommend it because I have loved this figure. Some of you also know that I don't have fixed permanent displays, that I change them around. So I was straight in the toy box. I was digging out the figures. You've seen, obviously, Nemesis or Pythona, the Pentor. I've got some of my Joe characters from the film, Big Lob, Tunnel Rat, Mercer, Sergeant Slaughter, made a little movie-themed display. I'm so happy with it. I love it. It looks great. I mean, it's insane. It's just so messy, but in all the right ways. So, yeah. I'm loving it. Very, very happy with this figure. I just wish that it was costed at a better rate that I could actually army build, because I don't really army build a great deal, but I wouldn't mind having 2 of these to do perhaps 2 of the different aesthetics. So there we go. And with that, I'll wrap up the review. One final thing to say, just a massive thanks to my mate Dylan, who picked this up over in the States and sent it over to me so that I could keep pace with all my fellow ToyTube reviewers and didn't fall too far behind. Pick this one up in Target for me, bless him. Thanks, Dylan. Appreciate you, bro. So all that remains to say is thanks very much for watching. If you did find this useful, if it did help you make a purchase decision, do all the YouTube stuff, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, blah, 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 all that thing. But what is more important to me is that you've enjoyed it and that you come back around here for another video sometime soon. So have yourselves a great day, and I'll catch you next time, folks, okay? And take it easy. There we go. I'm going to try and finish with him facing forward. There we go. Bye-bye.